this was the times of the one single line darshan, and you can see the old cars there in the background. And one time my friend used to drive there on a motorcycle, and he came late for darshan. He was speeding in, and he had to sort of swerve to avoid Swami. Next photo. Just Swami in his dining room. You can see this is not quite the palatial, simple life for Swamiji. Next slide. Downtown Puttaparthi, early 70s. In those days, there was no running water, so you would go for a bath to the bathhouse, and for 1 cent you get a bucket of cold water, or for 2 cents you get a bucket of hot water. And there used to be a big scene there in the morning, 4 a.m., and the dust is rising, and people are whipping their clothes, and they're bathing and stuff. But I used to go at 2 o'clock in the afternoon because it was hot. I would just have my leisurely, cold bath. And it's just a bunch of bamboo mats that make up these. So here are the water buffalo, and everyone's strolling by, and here's the thing, and you're sort of bathing. And it was all very casual. Next photo. So this is typical following Swami in the old days when, out in the middle of nowhere. And sometimes it was very lovely. We had the chance to follow him, and it was always very vague as to, see, we weren't with the invited group. We were with the sort of the rowdy group that, we were always on the edge. Were we about to be thrown out, or was it okay? Next slide. Just typical, typical scenes living in a pump house there. Next slide. Whitefield darshan under the shed there. Next slide. With Professor Gokak behind him, taking letters. Next slide. This would be a typical shot of the young Westerners. The fellow with his back to us is Benno Wiesner. He is now head of the German Sai organization. The blonde lady in the front is a Hollywood producer. And the Michelle Kaplowitz you might recognize from the very back. Next slide. This is Swami at the end of a Sunday darshan. Sometimes he would allow the Westerners to be like Save a Doll and holding the crowd back there a little bit. Next slide. Again, just you can see how casual it was. Next, there was like a little book stall right behind him there. This is Kathy Baer from California with Mrs. Hislop in the back, and Swami's giving out saris. Next slide. This is Christmas of 1971. We were in Madras, and here he's giving a candy to my sister who's looking up at him, and a number of people there, well-known Western devotees. Next slide. And this, I think of again as baby Krishna also. This was that period when Swami had white hair. He had sort of white hair. It was like half white. We were loving it. We thought it was great. I was waiting for it to turn all white. Then one day he came, it was all black again. He said, the students didn't like it. Next slide. He said, he would pull on his hair and say, see, 1 year, 2 years, Westerners coming, already hair's half white. Next slide. Next. So, next slide. So these would be made up by a photographer in Bangalore. And so they would always sort of come out hit or miss. And the darker, he said that the Westerners always bought the darker ones, and the Indians always bought the lighter ones. This is friends. We climbed up the mountain overlooking the ashram. Next slide. Here's me, Swami, giving something. This is Bhagavantam's son behind there. This must be about 74, 75. You can see East Prashanti just being built. Next slide. This is of that Christmas 71. Now this is the men's side, and we had been practicing before, and we were joking about, well, should we sing I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas? And so anyway, we sang our Christmas carols, and then Swami leaned over. I'm the third person there, sort of like closest to him, and Howard Levin is next, and Landon Carter. I don't know, you might not recognize some of the others. And he leaned over and he said, Dreaming White Christmas. So we sang that, and then he gave out these green candies. He said, no, green Christmas. Next photo. Typical smiling Swamiji. Next slide. And next slide. Here's him walking in the garden. I think just sort of the casual Swami. Next slide. This is from the hill behind. You can see how undeveloped Puttaparthi is. And this is all sort of, this is where the museum is and the administration building and it's all overgrown, and it's amazing. The ecology has totally changed from Swami's being there. This was, just dry desert scrub. And here's Swami talking to my mother and sister. It's just sort of halfway, very casual. Next slide. So again, my sister and mother there. And interestingly, how he draws people out. My mother came because we emotionally blackmailed her to come. We said, we're not coming back unless you come. And so then she came, and then Swami would, she was sort of standoffish about this whole thing, so she sort of kept separate, and he kept separate. Then he would sort of come a little closer. She would get a little interested. Then he would say, hello, and how are you? And she would this, and then he would start talking about, about things about the family. So this is me, my wife, my son, and the fellow on the left you may know as the famous diet doctor, Robert Atkins. This is very funny. So we were sort of like his chaperones for this trip to Uti, 1978. And, he was always saying, he got on this thing, oh, Swami hates me, Swami hates me. And we're saying, no, Swami doesn't hate you, And finally, to stop him, I started thinking, well, you've created this diet that's sort of based on killing animals. Maybe Swami does hate you. But anyway, Swami did give him a little nice interview, but he didn't. He had a hard time sort of grokking it. Next slide. The darshan line, how people start to, you get a good spot and then people pack in tighter and tighter and tighter. Next slide. And next slide. Some of you may know Lorraine Burrows from Thailand with the school there. Next slide. This is Swami Muktananda came to see Swami, and that was a whole drama for some of the young Westerners. And it's a very funny story. Muktananda came and sort of charges up the middle of the darshan line as Swami's just going back, and he grabs Swami, and Swami sort of gently pushes him away. And Swami Muktananda said something like, I wanted to see if he was the avatar, I wouldn't have been able to hug him. But Swami sort of pushed him away, and then they were sort of wandering around afterwards outside, wondering what to do. And so finally, some of the devotees asked Swami to come out. And so they came out, and there was just talking about the weather and ashrams and things like that. But the young Westerners were very into it. Next slide. This is Swami with my son and wife, baby naming. Next slide. And sort of, next slide. This is in Uti of 78. This is the New York devotees below. This is myself with my son Satya, and Swami came and said, chilly, keep warm. And Swami coming out for Whitefield Darshan. This would be what a typical pump house that I referred to looked like out in the fields. Next slide. This is later, this must be the early 80s with my son there. Next slide. And him looking up at Swamiji. I think that's quite beautiful. And next slide. It's funny. Next slide. This is again on the Whitefield Darshan line. Next slide. This I took because, again, I had this feeling that we wouldn't be allowed to give photos much more. And so one time I was there in the evening, and this slide right here he was scolding someone. So I had the perfect time, had all the time to keep the aperture open, and I'm not very good at photography, so I'm sort of there doing my whole thing. I'm having my little drama about the photo. Meanwhile, of course, this is like drama of a lifetime for the fellow being scolded by Swami. Next slide. Again, downtown Puttaparthi, just a bunch of bamboo mats and thatch, basically. And Swami making vibhuti and giving vibhuti. And we stop here for a second. So one time, you know, you see it so often and you're so close. So one time I was so close, I and another friend was there, and we put our face like right in there, you know, just we were, here's Swami and literally we're like right there to watch the whole thing. And it was still so mind-blowing because, you know, it just, your mind didn't compute, your mind stopped. And we were both laughing because it was just, your mind just really couldn't put a label on it. Next slide. Swami with the flowers, and you can see the vibhuti on his fingers. Next slide. This is Swami at Navaratri, and it's the sacred fire, and he's, let's hold on to that, or let's hold on to this one. So with this, he's materializing things that are required for such a yagna, and some of the things don't even exist anymore, certain types of grains, certain jewels, and things like that, and he's materializing them and throwing them into the fire. Next slide. Yes, and the ghee is being poured through that wooden tube down into the fire. Kutuma Rao is on the left, for those that remember. Next slide. And I love this slide. This is, you know, the panel for Krishna and for Kalki, the coming avatar. And Swami, this is the panels on the Purnachandra, that they're not quite there like this anymore. Next slide. A modest, understated little festival backdrop for Swamiji. Next slide. Oh, this is Hilda Charlton with Swami. She was a teacher in New York. She was very influential for a number of us. Next slide. Fooling around Swamiji with his Polaroid camera and trying to operate the Polaroid camera. And next slide. This is a daughter of a friend of mine. And let's hold on to this for a second. So he and his wife had not been able to conceive a child. And so I told them to ask Swami and also to pray to Shirdi Sai too, because Shirdi Sai was known for people who were coming for these kind of problems. And so they prayed, and twins were born to them. And so he brought the twins to the ashram. And one of the twins was totally devoted to Swami here, and the other twin was totally freaked out about the whole thing and just stayed in the room. So you can never tell how people's reactions are going to be. And so my friend, he and his wife, you know, after they conceived, they went back to their infertility group, and everyone asked them, you know, well, how and why, and they told them all about Swami and the vibhuti, and the whole infertility group got kind of into the whole thing about it. Next slide. This is Shivaratri, I think 1970, before I was there, when there was the old gazebo there. Next slide. This is the start of the stupa in 1975. This would have been Guru Purnima, in which Swami came and he threw the jewels into the pit there. And we were living right above in South Prashanti, and we had this beautiful view of it. And we also had the good fortune to be able to do some of the seva, you know, bringing the sand for the making of the stupa. And the stupa came up for World Conference in '75 November. This is the standard well-known photo by John Worldly of Hawaii, and it was very influential for me first knowing of Swami, was how I used to think of Swami. Next slide. Swami, again, a fooling around Swami. And next slide. Swami looking down at his devotees. Next slide, and so we know on the right who that is. And oops, Swami drinking at the local restaurant wanted to be blessed by Swami. And you see, in those days there was no color photography, so the black and whites would be then painted in the bazaar by someone with watercolor paint. Next slide. This is me on the left and Swami talking 75 World Conference, I believe. And that's Walter Neubauer, actually, with his back to us on the left there. Next slide. This is what darshan used to look like. And it would the entire darshan would happen on the veranda. So you see there's like a van sitting there on the veranda. There are the women, here are the men. Next slide. More of the same there. And next slide. Swami reaching down into the crowd to give. And next slide. This is from that mountaintop. This is the view, and down below you can see the Purnachandra and a few other things, and the Chitravati River in front. Next slide. A beautiful, charming Swami. Next slide. This is at a double wedding. Michelle and Richard Kaplowitz and Vijaya Huffman and Richard Huffman, my wife, just on the upper right there. And meanwhile, I didn't get in, and I was angry. Very foolish. Maybe there's the slide of that. Next slide. No, we'll get to that. Here's the Stern Swami in Whitefield. This is, you didn't want to be in the viewing range of this kind of look. Next slide. This is, we were called for an interview, and this is Swami coming to his interview room in Whitefield. And to me, this has a very compelling meaning. You know, there's Swami coming to you. He's like very direct and he's about to do what he's going to do. Next slide. Again, Swami leaving from the Sunday Darshan. Next slide. I like this photo. This is, you know, you see the people, they want something. And there's the beautiful God right there. Next slide. These were taken by my brother-in-law, Dan Wilcox. And next slide. So again, this is 72, and he's brought color film, so this is considered to be quite a big boon. Swamiji. Next slide. And this is, they've brought this boy who's crippled. And so again, this is sort of like what I was saying, you're kind of in the middle of this drama. You're sort of inserted right in there, and you're right in the middle of this lifetime drama there. Next slide. And next slide. And next slide. You can see the old flaming trees, the leaves have gone down, must be hot season. It doesn't really convey it here with the light, but there's kind of a bluish tinge to his hair in this. And this one again, I took with a very wide open aperture. Next slide. Here's Swami talking to me as I'm leaving for the first time. He's told me to go home. And it's a whole long story what happened. But basically, I had to ask him that, now I better, too long a story. But anyway, I was asking him about my visa because the Bangalore police weren't allowing me to leave, and they were claiming, you know, jail ahead for me. And so I asked him about it, and he looked at me like, after all you've seen, after all you've been here with me, and this is what you would ask me. It was this real heart-wrenching kind of moment. And then when I went back to the SP's office in Bangalore that afternoon, this fellow who had been saying, you know, for months, you know, we're gonna prosecute, you know, I didn't know what was going to happen. He threw across an application for a year visa, and he backdated the whole thing as though I had applied for it for 6 months ago. And then, you know, then he gave all those stamps and said, "Now get out." Next slide. Swami in the sunset. Next slide. And next slide. I like the one on top there, sort of a foxy, kind of a mischievous Swami. And the fellow below, Swami's talking to Mr. Patel. He owned some movie theaters, and he's in a wheelchair, and he always wanted to know when he was going to be cured. Swami said, "When you're able to reach down and touch my feet." So at the end of the darshan, he'd always be trying to reach down to touch Swami's feet. Okay, next slide. You can't quite see it. It's sort of Swami coming out of the shadows there. Next slide. And next slide. And next slide. I like this one very much. And next slide. Swami with the animals. Next slide. Swami on his tiger skin. You know the tiger story. I won't tell it, but it's wonderful. Next slide. And next slide. Is this the beginning? Have we gone through that? Okay. So I also wanted to, just about different committees we talked about. I'm a co-chair of the International Archive Committee, so I wanted to show a few slides just to show what that's about. I also have my own agenda on this. I want you to get interested. Okay, why don't you show that, the PowerPoint one. So Swami would stand on the top there and unfurl the flag, and he would shower the devotees below with flower petals that came from the flag, and it was quite a lovely moment. So the Archive Committee, the idea is that there are millions and millions and who knows, maybe billions of stories about Swami, and we all have them. And it's a very, very powerful thing. But also, forgetfulness comes down, and we forget our stories. And if we share our stories, and if they're recorded, they imprint on us much more deeply. It's a kind of a form of sadhana, and it's a gratitude towards sadhana, and it's helpful for family, friends, the center, the nation, and also for future people that want to hear about Swami. There'll be more material than anyone could look through in their whole life, but it's just that whole thing that it's just so expansive. There's just so much there. Okay, next slide. So you know the 9 paths of devotion, and we don't have time to go into them, but the first, which we've been doing this weekend, is Shravanam, listening to the glories of the Lord. And this quote from Swami, Shravanam, hearing about God, these are the important events in life, events that transform the individual. Next slide. And about Smaranam, recollection and remembrance. Of the 9 paths, the easiest and most practical is Smarana. No regimen of exhausting sadhanas prescribes Smarana is enough. Smarana is the surest means of mastering the wiles of the mind. So for people worried about their mind, I wanted to read this quote. This is from the beginning of A.A. Reddy's nine Gems. Maybe some of you are familiar with it, but the quote is so lovely I wanted to share it, if I can find it. It says, and I quote, yes, mind-boggling and awe-inspiring are Baba's miracles. Mind-elevating and mind-eliminating and self-illuminating are Baba's universal teachings. So it stops our mind when we think about it. And about the devotees, with their mind wholly fixed on me, with their lives totally dedicated to me, mutually enlightening one another, and ever thinking of me, and ever speaking of me, they feel contented and delighted indeed. So, next slide. So here's what we're looking to archive. So audio, video, written histories, particularly the elder devotees, but eventually we want to get to everyone. This is like a 50-year project. Testimonies of direct personal interactions. If there are rare photos or films, obviously that's very important. And down the road, hopefully some kind of museum-worthy pieces at the center level, national level, international level. Next slide. This is from Poland. Next slide. So a possible strategy to do this is to ask the young and the family to interview the elders. It's one way to it's useful for the family and also might be easiest way to go about it. Next slide. This is an example from Peru. Next slide. And this is about the miracle start to the organization there. We also encourage national organizations to write up their story about this. And next slide. Here's just a picture of the devotees from Belgium, so this is very important to them. Next slide. And from Japan, the devotees there. Next slide. And next slide. So really the pictures are very, very important to us because they sort of remind us of the story. And so next slide. More slides from Japan. Next slide. And next slide. And next slide. And here's a fellow we interviewed before. He was one of the young Westerners in that, when I showed the photo of Christmas 71. And he was an artist for Swami, and he did this in flowers. This is at Dharmakshetra, Christmas 1970. He also did the, next slide. He did the murals at the Anantapur Girls College. Next slide. We'll go over that later. Next slide. So that's what I wanted to say about that. So we have an International Archive Committee. We have a National Archive Committee. And here we have Krishna Srinivasan, who's on our archive committee, but he's been so overburdened by other things that we asked Eric Wing to help coordinate this in Southern California. So if you have questions about it afterwards, ask any of the three of us. We can, hopefully be helpful that way. Okay, that's, I think, all that I have. Okay, Sarah. Is this one? Okay, thanks. So the question is, how do you manage spiritual life? Can you hear it? No, still the same. How do you manage spiritual life, work life, and family life? Well, this is a question for each of us. No one really has, I think, this one down pat. So this is all what Swami would call adjustment sadhana. He would be teasing people about how they were bogged down in family life, and one of the devotees was telling him, "Oh, Swami, we're so bogged down, we feel so badly about it." He said, "No, don't feel badly. Just adjustment sadhana." So it's kind of sweet. He teases us about it, but he knows that this is one of the things that we have to do. I did talk a little bit about this in the book, The Dharmic Challenge. I had a chapter called "Work is Worship." And it was about the time when I worked on Wall Street for 12 years. And it has a whole story to that. And it was like going from Swami to the Wall Street was sort of like going from the sublime to the ridiculous. And so in it, I sort of discussed, was I able to keep the work and that in line? And the answer was not very well, actually. But it all worked out. Swami was using it as a way of teasing me. So he'd say, thinks too much about money, like, after all you've seen and heard, that you would be thinking about money, so distasteful, that he says, don't think about money. And then he would be like a little child. He says, it's like money. He suddenly become like a villager. Money. That's like he's seeing this big mountain of gold, and he says, oh, a lot of money's coming. And 3 months, then he's sort of muttering away, and so in this, if I'd had my wits about me, I should have said, I'll split it with you, Swami. But as it was, not a lot of money came. But, it's like having the Delphic Oracle as your friend. You know that he knows, but you can't quite figure out what he's saying. It turned out it was the exact bottom of the just before the major bull market of our lifetime, the one that's happened the last 3 decades. And so it was just a way of showing he knows that we're there. Yes.
Just to add to that a little bit, Swami also says that life is not separate from each other. Spiritual life is not separate from your family life, from your other work. Everything has to be Swami's work. When you're at work, think of it as Swami's work, and Swami is the CEO, and you're working for him and work accordingly. When you're at home and you're cooking for your family or looking after your children, you're looking after Swami's children. You're making the food for Swami. If you think of it like that, then everything becomes the same. There's no separation between family life, spiritual life, and work life.
So the next question, I'll probably ask Geetha to help bail me out on this. It says, what does Swami say about marriage? And what is the role of husband? What's the role of wife? And different dharmas for different people. And so I can't give an answer that's going to, be for everyone. But for the young Westerners, he used to tell us, if you want to get married, get married. If you don't want to get married, don't get married. But don't make such a a big deal about it. He didn't say big deal, but it was something to that effect. You know, you sort of get yourself all engrossed in this thing, and it's basically, he was sort of just de-emphasizing it. This is just part of life, one way or another, what works for you, and it's your sadhana and your relationship to God that's most important. And he sort of emphasized that to me one time, and he came in a dream, and he said to me, you're looking at your roommate too much. And the roommate, in this case, meant my wife. And it sort of like meant like I had this judgment, like what is she doing, or what about this, and what about that? And basically, you know, the real thing, the real foreground, the real important thing is your relationship with God. Anything to add?
Yeah, the only thing, just two things maybe I can add. When I got married, Swami performed my marriage in one of those buildings that Phil was just showing you all. And at that time, I was a young, and you know, this was traditional Bangalore of the 70s. At that time, the advice he gave me was slightly different to the, not different, but it added on to the advice that he gave my son, whose marriage he performed in 2008 in Prasanthi Nilayam, my son's marriage. So in my wedding, he said that remember that you have been a part of me since your birth. You have listened to me, heard me, I have been in your life. So whatever you do in your marriage, how you go about your marriage with your husband will affect my name. So he put this huge responsibility on my shoulders. So they will always say, is this the girl that Swami brought up? So remember that. So it kept me on the straight and narrow path, because every time I wanted to say something, I would say, oh my goodness, I don't know if Swami would approve of this. So that was how my marriage went, and of course it's 40 years old now. But my son got married. My son was born and brought up here in the US. I have twin sons. So their upbringing was quite different from mine, because they grew up here in a Western country. And Swami found a girl that he had never met, never seen, and got him married to this girl in Prasanthi Nilayam. And to them he gave some beautiful advice that I thought would work, and maybe for all of us here. He said, marriage is togetherness. You must always learn to be sharing, caring, and then loving. So when you share everything with each other, then you will care for each other. When you care for each other, you will love each other. So he didn't start with loving, he started with sharing. So start sharing. And then the other thing he said is, when somebody gets really very, very upset with you, if your spouse gets upset with you, the important thing is not to prove that you're right. The important thing is to listen. And then when everything is calm, maybe then you can talk it over. And then actually my daughter-in-law's grandmother said, Swami, please tell Varun, that is my son, to look after Sai, the girl, my granddaughter. So Swami said, why? That he should only look after your granddaughter. She should look after him as well. Marriage is things that you share together. You share everything together. So that was the advice that Swami gave.
I just wanted to add to that. It was the sometime after marriage we came back, and Swami said, are you fighting? And it's sort of like a trick question, you know?
Right.
So before we answered, we looked at each other like, ooh, how are we going to do this one? Because we thought we were doing better than average American couples, but maybe not up to Vedic standards. So I sort of said, I said, well, a little bit, and he said, a little bit. And then he just went on, but anyway. Yeah, like that.
Well, he told me once that I was bugging my husband too much to finish the basement in our house. We had an unfinished basement, just fighting all the time about the basement. I wanted to finish the basement because I wanted to have bhajans there, you know, that was it. So I said, Swami, I'm only fighting because I want to have your bhajans. So he said, don't you go to the center on Sundays? And I said, yes. Do you do your family bhajan on Thursdays? I said, yes. Then how many more bhajans do you want? So that was the end of my argument with my husband.
Good. Do you want to do your next question?
Yes, it says, thank you for sharing it. It says, I wanted to ask you what Swami said about how to quieten the mind. I think we are all on the same boat, more or less. It's hard to quieten the mind. Swami always compares it to a monkey. And then once he told me it's not only a monkey, the monkey's mind, monkey is always moving around. It's a mad monkey. Not only is it a mad monkey, it's a drunken mad monkey. And not only is it a drunken mad monkey, it's a drunken mad monkey bitten by a scorpion. So you feel almost hopeless. There's no way we can do anything about this mind. But the only thing that Swami always says is, of course, Namasmarana, we all know that, as much as possible, when we are sitting quietly to do Namasmarana. But I've heard him say that also to keep the company of good people, where you talk about good things, rather than the company of negative people, where the mind is agitated because of their negativeness. They tell you one negative thing, then you think of 20 negative things to tell them, and then it's passed on. So try to be in the company. That is why Swami says satsang is most important. Of course, at the highest level, Swami means satsang is the company of the truth, not even other people in our lives. But to the best of our ability, I think, to keep the company of good people who talk about good things. It doesn't always have to be about Swami, but even if, you say how beautiful the snow is today outside, when you look at the mountains and you can appreciate it with someone, that's a good thing, because he's in nature. So the good company, good people to talk to, good Namasmarana, of course, whenever you can get a chance to do that. So try to be in that little box. I think you can quieten the mind slowly, but it requires practice. Practice.
And this question sort of echoes that one. It says, how can you live without desires? How to get out of fear? So these are real basic bedrock issues for sadhakas. This is really very, very important. So we can beat ourselves up that we have desires, and that's kind of counterproductive. I think the way to do it, from my viewpoint, and I think Swami might agree, I don't know, that when you have a desire, you speak to Swami about it. Speak to him. Tell him, I have this desire. And so is this appropriate? What should I be doing next? Can you help me? What should happen? If you think about Swami, these things take care of themselves. Same with a fear. You tell him, I'm afraid of this. I'm afraid of that. Because fear is what drives most of us, but we sort of keep it to ourselves. It's sort of like, oh, I'm not going to show that. And basically, Swami says, why fear when I have come? And that's really the truth. When we think about him, and as I was trying to say yesterday, when the worst case scenario, let's say we were all, a landslide wiped us all out. Worst case scenario. So that we're still all right. Still all right, no matter what happens, because we're with the Lord. We're with God. We are God. So to me, that's how to approach it. But these are the real basic questions that obviously come up in therapy and come up for all of us in our everyday life.
Yes. And it would be unrealistic for all of us, any of us, to say we have no desires. We have some desire area. We are born as human beings. In fact, Swami once told me in an interview room, if you have no desires, you're not a human being. You will have some desire as a human being. But how we channel that desire and how we control it is what we have to. We have to question ourselves sometimes, do I really need this thing? Once you put the word need as opposed to want, then the whole picture changes. I want it, but I'm not sure if I need it. Once you apply that to yourself, then there are a lot of things. Because now after 40 years of marriage, I look at my house and say, how did I collect so many things? So now 40 years later, we are now thinking of how to get rid of all these things that we have collected. So now we have a new problem. Who should we give this to now? Children don't want it. In fact, we have their stuff still in our house. They've been married for 10 years. So that is where we have to start looking at life realistically and see, do we really need it? But we all have desires, how we control it and what we are looking at. And also when we serve society around us, and when we see people who don't even have basic things, and we want something more extra, something more luxurious, we ourselves feel guilty. How can I justify buying this when somebody can't even get a meal today? When you apply that to yourself, then it becomes easier to control the desires, I think. Yes, that's my question.
You have another one?
No. Are you going for the next one? I think
no,
you had more questions.
How many do you have?
Okay. I just have a couple more. But
Okay.
Do you have a lot?
Yeah,
go
well,
ahead.
why don't I go
Yeah,
with the
you
next
have a
one,
lot,
'cause
so
I
go
have a
ahead.
bunch.
I
like these questions. What type
Yes.
of actions, thoughts, words are to be practiced to become dearest and best devotee to reach the divine lotus in this lifetime before leaving the body? Is unconditional love towards nature and all the beings, should that be sufficient to reach divine lotus in this lifetime? Well, I very much like where this devotee is coming from. This is great. You know, it's basically saying, I have this life and I have this goal, and what is it that I can do to reach that goal? And so in this, this is such a high-level question. In a sense, you shouldn't be asking me, you should be asking Swami. Because this is really between you and he, and the fact that you want it that much is really powerful. So they say that a number of Swami and other people, when you've had your head dunked in water and you can't breathe, and you're desperate for air, and you're so desperate at the last minute you get the air, that's how strong and intense your feeling should be for this freedom and this liberation. And what you do to get there, we all know Swami's teachings, find the ones that resonate for you and do them with all your heart. But ask Swamiji, because this is powerful. Swami likes this.
Yes. No, I don't have anything.
Okay, you want to do?
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. What are the challenges that the Sai organization faces to stay relevant in the international society? Well, actually, it's very relevant because just from an ecological point of view, I talked a little bit about that. This is a life and death issue, and sealing on desires is a life and death issue for our species, and loving everyone, cooperating with everyone is becoming a life and death issue. And people are waking up that basically modern society, even though there are tremendous technological breakthroughs, people really don't have a clue, as to what's going to happen next. And Swami said this. He was saying all along, these technological inventions are way ahead of where people are characterologically. And so that people are coming to that realization with the character that we have now floating around, we're in big trouble. And so we need a renewed, elevated character. And the Sai organization is very, very relevant, and it's being recognized around the world that way, and I believe that this is going to be a major change force for the good.
What is enlightenment and liberation, and how do you keep track of the spiritual journey? How do you know that you are progressing? As far as enlightenment and liberation is concerned, I don't know. I'm yet to reach that goal. Having been born as a human being, Swami says that should be our goal. But one thing that Swami said to me once when we were in the room chatting with him, we were all completely immersed in what Swami was saying, and none of us had any thoughts for the people outside or even anybody. We were completely immersed in what Swami is saying. And suddenly he stopped talking and he said, how many people were there outside today for darshan? And we all looked blankly at him because our thoughts had not even gone outside for a split second. And Swami used that and said, that is what bliss is. When you're completely one with me, thinking of nothing else but me, listening my voice, my everything, your whole body is completely immersed in thoughts of me, that is bliss. If you can elongate it to every moment of your life, then you become an enlightened person. So if you experience it for a split second, you have to go on elongate it through the many, many ways that Swami has told us. He has given us Namasmarana, he has given us service, he has given us so many discourses which tells us how we can go about to do this. But to experience that for a minute. And many people, you may say that, oh, you had an interview, but what about me? I don't know what that is. A lot of people ask me that. But you have all experienced it in different ways. Somebody who loves nature for a split second when they see the sunrise, they may have experienced that moment. Somebody that I know very well, like my brother Sheil here, when he sings and completely immersed in his Budgin, he has experienced it. Somebody else who's immersed in the seva activity, you have experienced it. You just have to elongate it to every moment of your life. That is why we sing that Budgin. Every moment of my life, please be with me. That's what that means. Not physically present, but to be with us mentally, physically, emotionally, in every possible way, is how I look at it. I hope that is somewhat a satisfactory answer for all of you, because I'm also in the same boat as all of you.
So this question is, watching your thoughts always and thinking of Sai. When someone is judging you or criticizing you or aggressively yelling at you, how can we think of our Sai? Because our natural reaction is to hit back. So this is a great moment, because this is where you get double points, this is where really things are very good for you. Your sadhana can move ahead really quite quickly with this. And so Swami says, when someone's criticizing you, you should first think, are they right? And is there something I should learn from this? And so you should be quick to say, oh, well, maybe you're right. Maybe I should look at this further. And that usually takes a lot of the air out of it. And but if you know for sure that they're wrong, that this doesn't really apply to you, then you should be thinking, poor fellow, why is he getting all agitated about this? This has nothing to do with anything. This has to do with some internal drama of theirs. And we should be thinking of Swami. We should be thinking of Swami, and it should become almost funny. There should be like, this is so outrageous. There must be Swami. Must be Swami there. Like when I was saying about, they think Swami's a dog. This must be Swami, And yeah, that's my answer to that.
Just the additional part of the question that I didn't answer, how can we keep track of our spiritual journey and know that we are progressing? I think subconsciously all of us know. If we are someone like me who is always talking to someone, and if I'm quiet even for half an hour, someone will ask me, are you okay? So I think if we try practicing, we all know that if we are making any. But it's really, spiritual practice is not for us to track it. There is no particular goal that we have to reach in a certain time. We have to put every day as a spiritual practice and leave the rest to Swami. He knows where to take us, in which path to take us. Leave it to him. Let's not worry about the goal so much as we should worry about the process as to how we are going about it.
And if I might add to that, in psychology they say how do you judge mental health is the ability to love and to work. And I think that also applies in the spiritual life too, to love and to serve. And Swami would say, you can judge your development. Are you speaking more sweetly? Are you acting in a more brotherly, sisterly way? So those are some of the ways. So the question here is, Swami calls for chanting the divine name during service activities. Sometimes in the flow of service activities we forget to chant. How do we continuously chant God's name during service activities? Well, okay. So this is pretty much the same as the question, how do we continuously chant Sai's names 24/7? Basically, service activities are a little bit easier in the sense that you start with it. This is specifically about Swami. And sometimes you don't want to be chanting out loud, depending on the people that you're working with. This might not be appropriate.
Yes.
So, but thinking about Swami, trying to keep Swami's name involved. Swami tells the traditional Hindu story about Narada was asking Vishnu, who's the greatest devotee? And because he was doing the chanting all day, and Vishnu sort of undercut his ego by showing this farmer who just thought about him once at the end of the day, but did everything as focused as he can. And I think that also encompasses Swami's feelings on this. So sometimes it's hard to be, I'm trying to do my sadhana and do this other thing, my work at the same time. I said, no, it's not quite like that.
Yeah, nothing more. I think that was a perfect answer. That's true. And he quoted the story that I was thinking in my head also, where the farmer thinks about the Lord just once a day and goes about his work. The question I have is, can you please share an experience of Swami after 2011 about his omnipresence? For me, 2011 doesn't particularly make any difference because I came to the US so many years ago. If so many things can happen to you 10,000 miles away from his physical form, it's the same as his physical form not being there even then, when his form was in Parthi. So I don't really see the difference. But for me, I always have tried to see Swami in everything that I try to do as much as I can. I cannot say that I'm always aware at all times. But just one small instance, maybe just because somebody is looking for a tangible evidence, maybe that's what the question is. But we really shouldn't. If you looked out of your window today and everything looked beautiful, that should mean that Swami is right there with you. Such a beautiful atmosphere he created. Can you hear me? He created today for our retreat here. But I was coming back from one of the retreats when I was in Maryland. I was getting back home. It was in the winter. It was actually not, it was a one-day retreat and it was in the winter, and the person on the Monday morning dropped me at the airport, the Sai devotee, and I was supposed to take my flight back to DC. And what happened was all of the flights were cancelled because of the snow that had happened there. So all the flights were cancelled, and I tried to contact the Sai devotee who had dropped me off so that I could go back home. They said there were no flights till the following day. So I wanted to go back home, and he was in some meeting or whatever it was. He didn't pick up the phone at all. And I was wondering what I was going to do about this. I called my husband, I told him what had happened. He said, just try, otherwise just go to the nearest hotel or someplace and check yourself in for the night, and you can try tomorrow morning. And as I was doing this, one of the ladies who was at the TSA when I had given my thing, she had just come up to the counter and she looked at me and said, you didn't go? And the reason why she asked me that question was she had opened my hand baggage to check it for some reason. You know, they pull aside some people. And there in my hand baggage, in the little space there, I had a Swami's picture that I carry with me wherever I go. She was an African-American lady. She had looked at Swami's picture. This is the second time that has happened to me. Once when Swami was there in his physical form. And this time, it was in 2013. And she looked at Swami's picture and said, oh, good-looking boyfriend. So I said, yes, isn't he? I said. Because I wasn't going to be standing there at the TSA checkout to be explaining anything to her. I said, yeah, isn't he? And she said, well, if you dump him, let me know. I said, okay. And I had walked away after that. So when I was waiting for the flights and trying to find out what I could do next, she came there and she said, you didn't go? So I said, no. And she came up to me and said, well, come with me. I know that gate 23 has, I think there's a flight leaving for Philadelphia. And my friends were in Philadelphia and they would pick me up if I went there. I'll take you there. And she came and took me there. And I go to the gate, and right there at the gate, there was this gentleman saying, oh, we were just about to close the gates, but I think someone called Sai Baba came and told me to just wait for a few seconds. So I didn't see Swami. They said, just wait for a second, there's another lady just coming to board the flight. So the TSA said, see, I told you. And she said, who's that Sai Baba? I said, he's that boyfriend we were talking about. So she said, wow, he must be influential. And I said, yes, he is. So I said goodbye to her. They kept the gate open, and I took the flight back home. So. I took the flight to Philadelphia, actually, and my friends drove me home. But
I think we can say best boyfriend ever.
Absolutely. Can depend on them, depend on him.
I also had an experience. I was speaking at the Dominican Republic retreat, and there was a public meeting, and there's some Haitian medical students had come, and they were in the back, and they saw Swami there at the thing. And, you know, they were new to Swami, and they said, you know, who's the fellow that's in the picture, because he was here in the back with us.
Oh, beautiful.
So it was, these things happen. And okay. Let's see, this continuation question. Sometimes while doing prayers or chanting Vedam, there are thoughts of daily ongoing activities or other. How do we still the mind? Well, okay, good person.
Tough.
Doing Vedam and chanting and worried about stilling the mind. Swami likes this very much. And I think about Ramakrishna, the famous story, the donor of the temple where he was the priest. You know, she was there doing some prayers and things like that, and he reaches over and he slaps her across the face because she was thinking about business things as she was doing the prayers. And there's a story of Shirdi Sai Baba. You know, one of the devotees was looking at the ladies when he should have been doing his prayers, and he got slapped by Shirdi Sai. So I think when these things happen, when our minds wander during our sadhana activities, we should tell Swami. You know, sometimes we try and fake it. And we're not really looking at it. Don't look, Swami, you know. Because sometimes our sadhana is kind of mediocre. You know, it's just sort of rote, and he's not very into it, and we're not into it, and we're feeling bad about it. But tell him, gee, Swami, I'm saying your name, but it's you know, I'm just, I seem to be a little lost here. You know, could you help me? Anything that really gets it real, because this is heart to heart. This is a real thing between you and Swami. This isn't fooling around. This isn't just like you mumble this formula and it happens.
Yes, I agree with that. There's not much more to add to that. And we have to keep practicing. I think that's the key word. And Swami also says that sometimes a good way to practice is to fix a certain time every day and spend it there. And slowly, as time goes by, you will learn to do it. It's not something that's going to happen overnight, and it's not a quick fix to everything. In fact, Swami once joked and said, you in America want to do everything in 1 minute. You want to do everything faster and faster and faster. But spiritual life has to happen slowly, because then it becomes strong and it gets internalized within you. It's not a quick fix for everything. You won't have instant gratification for everything, especially a spiritual life. You have to practice and do all of the things that Swami says in so many discourses. And if we even take up one thing, I think we can slowly practice and try to still the mind. Mind is a difficult thing, as we answered the earlier question.
Do you have another one?
No, I have a last one. So if you have a few more, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, well, let me try this one. Well, we know that Swami knows everything that is happening in the world that is so tumultuous. Is there any use reading about these and getting even more perturbed about all the bad news? Well, as someone who is a media addict, hopefully in recovery, Swami once told me, he sort of leans down, he says to me, he says, all media in the West, completely bad. And I was like, in my mind, I was thinking, completely? And, you know, it's like how Swami reads your thoughts. He says, yes, complete. So the media is useful in the sense that sometimes it can hold things accountable, and media also has its place in emphasizing the good, and also it's useful for us to use media to do our duty as citizens, because we're going to have to make political choices and do our duty voting as citizens. And you know, it's useful to know if a forest fire is headed in your direction and things like that. So it's useful to know sort of just the general. But what it is we sometimes get sucked into the drama of it all. It's like watching TV over and over and the next thing. And someone described it, it's like, you know, you drive by an accident and you tell yourself, don't look, you're looking, you know, looking the whole thing. So it's a sort of a bad habit. And it takes up chunks of our brain that would be useful to have Swami there. So that's my thought on that.
Yes. I mean, it is difficult for all of us, I think, because we are so surrounded by all of this technology to stay from. But I have been trying to practice that I only check my messages and so on and so forth just twice a day. Nothing so serious is going to happen that it cannot wait till the end of the day. And you know, if somebody really died, they would probably call and not send you a WhatsApp message. So, you know, I say you can wait. And as far as the news and other things, Swami clearly says the more you see all of these things, you're feeding it through your senses. And apart from the food that we eat, which has to be sattvic, if all of the other food that we take in through the other 5 senses are also not controlled, then it's going to be a problem. Just like the food that we eat, if we eat too much and not control it, we are going to have problems from the physical body. So too for the mental, and he is a psychologist, he can explain that much better than I. It affects your mind. So we have to control. I think the biggest word, I think, is control is very important. And sometimes even with my sons, I don't know, when they were young, their idea of control was 16 hours of TV, whereas my idea of TV was 16 minutes of TV. So what is the control? So then you have to think about it a little bit and put yourself into that. I have one question here. How do you connect to Swami in his physical absence? How do you connect to Swami? For me, I mean, I think Brother Phil put in a very nice slide there. One is Shravanam and the other is Smaranam. So for me, because I give so many talks, people are listening and I am talking about it. For me, in that sense, it's a little bit easier. I'm always talking about it. Nobody ever calls me just to ask how I am. They always say, oh, this happened to me. Can you tell me what Swami would have said? So then I launch into some stories. I'm always talking about Swami. So for me, it's the talking about Swami. And then once I talk about it, I keep thinking about it. So for those of you who are listening or reading or with friends with satsang, if you're constantly thinking and doing things, thinking about Swami, talking about Swami, or more than anything, if you have involved yourself in service, through which you are connecting to Swami, you can connect very easily, I feel, to Swami's physical form. Because not everybody in this world has had the good fortune of interacting with him physically like that. But they have all connected. Many of you have not had any interaction, but you have spent your whole weekend here. If you didn't connect to him, you wouldn't be here. You would be somewhere else. Because you have connected, you are here. So that itself will tell you that you have connected to him in some way. You just have to figure out how you did it. No.
So there were several questions that had a similar theme, so I just wanted to answer those all together. This reminds me of something that Swami told me. I used to be kind of a wanderer, and he told me at one point, he said, running here and there, that is not my teaching. And it's, I think, particularly important these days because without Swami in physical form, sometimes people wander off a little bit. And Swami used to say, don't be involved in all these other gurus. Your guru should be God. You shouldn't be involved in, this drama or that drama. We've had enough drama in this world. We should connect to the divine drama and leave the rest. And that we've been called by the Purna Avatar himself. We've been very, very lucky. Even more lucky than the people in the avatars of Krishna and Rama. That he's reached out and plucked us. Reached out on the other side of the world and plucked us to him. And we should, to doubt that he is enough for us. In a sense, by running after, looking for some other guru, it's like we're saying that he's not enough for us. We need something else. But no, there are more volumes than you can read. There are more experiences than you can read. There are more things that you can delve into about your own relationship with Swami. To go somewhere else is ridiculous, basically. It's just increasing the drama. And so Swami said very directly that you should stick with this organization, and it's a way of focusing your sadhana. It's sort of like bringing you back to the path, and it's a way of sort of balancing you out. Sometimes we have our own views of sadhana and we sort of wander off a little bit, and it's useful to bring us back in this way. And so Swami was also very direct about saying he didn't come through any intermediaries, and there's no one else that you should be looking of as an agent of Swami. We're speakers, so that's lovely, but it's not like we're agents of Swami. We're telling you, we remembered Swami said this. And it should be like that. We're all fellow pilgrims together on this. Exactly. And there's only one level, and then there's Swami. And Swami is everything to us. And he said, you look to me, I look to you. He'll take care of the whole thing, that we don't need to really get too far into it. And a unity with Swami that way. Did you say
Yes.
something?
I actually, to build on that, I have a question here which says very directly to me, what is your opinion about Muddenhalli? This is the question I have received. I'm sure everybody is nodding their heads. And Phil is an official person from the organization, and he has given a very beautiful answer. I, as a devotee who doesn't have an official position also, feel that I will answer, because I have had this connection with Swami since my birth. He named me, he did everything for me, got me married, named my children, name it, he has done it. For me, and Swami has very clearly said that I do not come through any agent, medium. I talk to your heart directly. Even the answers that both Phil and I have given you, as he correctly said, we say Swami says. If you pray hard enough, he will connect with you directly and give you an answer. Through a book, through a thought for the day, through some radio Sai program, something, but you will get your answer. Somebody came and told me, I had so many questions, your talk yesterday gave me some answers. So you will get the answers directly. He will not talk through any medium or anybody else. Swami has clearly said that. That's the first thing. The second thing that Swami also says is, if you're really a spiritual aspirant, you have to dig your well in one place if you want to hit water. If you dig 5 feet in 10 different places, you will never find that water. You have to dig deep in one place. And if you persist, you will find that. So if we have not found it in 15 minutes, then we haven't persevered hard enough. There is still something wrong in the way we are practicing our sadhana. So we have to continue to do that. The third thing, and the reason I'm expanding, and I hope Phil doesn't mind, is that so many places that I go to, I get this question. And I feel that I want to answer, because I feel that I have seen the Lord who has come down, who has done so much for humanity. He never asked for a single penny from anybody. Even when I was young, when there were not so many people who gave voluntarily the money to build the super specialty hospital or the college, Swami physically himself worked. I have seen him cook the rice for the Narayan Seva himself. He didn't ask anybody for money. So if anybody says you have to give money in Swami's name, I will not accept that they are devotees of Swami. Because Swami said very clearly, in fact, in one of the discourses that I was present in Prashanti Nilayam, he said that if there is no money for the water project, I will sell my Prashanti Nilayam and I will pay for the water project. That is the Swami that I know. That is the Swami that I know. So if anybody says that you have to donate money for their let them do projects. There's nothing wrong with any Sai doing any project. A lot of people say the Muddenalli people are doing wonderful projects. What is wrong? Certainly, all of us, I know that I have donated to the Vietnam veterans here, to the Red Cross here. Nobody stops you from giving. But to use Swami's name to collect money and then use that money for some work, Swami has never given permission for that. If anybody ever says that, they are not truly Sai devotees. That's all I have to say about it.
So I wanted to add that, one of our things, we're going to be here, let's say, decades more. Between now and when the Prema Sai is sort of universally accepted as this is Prema Sai, there will be so many pretenders that there will be so many people asking or for money and various things. Already there must be 10 or 20 such people. Even when Swami was alive, there were people that imitated Swami and that looked like Swami or in some smaller form. And even in the Krishna avatar, there was someone who was pretending to be Krishna, and Krishna finally killed him. But that was a different yuga, and it's a much gentler yuga this time because. So we need to roll with it, and it's sad sometimes that our brothers and sisters sometimes get too involved in these things, and we pray that they're not hurt by this, and that Swami's name is not misused in any way. And the organization has done various legal actions to try and stop misuse of Swami's name. And so we will do our best in that form. And I didn't want to end on that note, so I wanted to build on what Geetha said, that Swami will speak to you himself. So Swami said, if you listen carefully and deeply and devotedly, he will sing you your own Geetha. And I had a little experience with that. In one phase, I don't know, about 20 years ago, I was I thought, I'm interested in opera, and so I was listening to a lot of opera. It was sort of just a thing that came and went. But during that period, Swami appeared in a dream, and he was singing beautiful opera to me, and just singing and singing. And I woke up, and it was just so elevated, but I couldn't remember what he was singing except the last line. It was like a form of some Latin language, French or Italian, or sort of a corruption of it. It was sort of like, tua qua, and it meant, in my mind, it meant, who are you? Who are you? Tell me who you are. And so I keep that in mind.
Now, I also wanted to end in a little different way. As it is, we are seeing through our questions that to follow one Swami's one teaching itself is so difficult. So why do we need so many Swamis to give us so many more teachings that we are not able to practice and get confused? That's one thing. But we are here in this beautiful land of America, such beauty around us. I thought I'll tell you what Swami says, where he really is. I had gone for the first time after I came here many, many years ago, for the first time to see the Niagara Falls. And when I saw that beautiful falls thundering down, my husband and children were there and says, doesn't this look like Swami? So powerful, thundering down. When Swami just walks out of his building, just a small figure, but thousands of people will stop what they are doing and they will just look at him. You cannot take your eyes off him. So powerful, such a tiny being, just with a smile. Doesn't this Niagara Falls remind you of this? And after 4 years, I went to India. And Swami called me for an interview, and along with us, he had called a group of Canadian Sai devotees. And as soon as we sat down, Swami introduced them to me. Said, these people are all from Canada, they're from here, they're from Toronto, they're from different places in Canada. And then he introduced me to them and said, this is Geetha, I know since she was born. But he said, I know since before she was born. And after saying that, but she doesn't know me at all. She thinks I am the Niagara Falls. So that is our beloved Swami. How can we exchange him for anyone? We cannot exchange him.
I wanted to close by thanking you all, and just with these words from Swami. He says, we go back into the world. He says, never believe in this world. This life is just a bridge. You don't take up residence on the bridge. In other words, we're here, like you've seen that bumper sticker, just visiting from another planet. Mm-hmm. We're here to do our duty, to do our best, but our real home is Swami, and Swami is calling us. And I wanted to end on my own version of Om Purnamida Purnamidam. I'm not really qualified to say the Sanskrit so well, but to me it means, this is perfect, that is perfect. This is good, that is good. This is full, that is full. We should look at God as everywhere, as permeating everything. This is infinite, that is infinite. The infinite is taken from the infinite, only the infinite remains. Thank you very much.